Welcome to another episode of Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. This isn't just a podcast, it's a front row seat to how elite leaders build iconic teams. The kind of leaders who spot potential that others overlook, who build cultures people don't want to leave, who set the bar and then raise it. Work and how we work is evolving at such a rapid pace, like no time in our history. Our guests will give you insights on how to stay out in front when it comes to leadership, management, culture, AI, and developing the skills that actually matter. Whether you're a founder, a hiring manager, or just obsessed with building the right way, this is your spot. First time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, drop a rating, tell a friend who gets it. Longtime listeners, we appreciate you. Now, let's get into today's guest. Today, folks, I'm joined by a real powerhouse, somebody I've known for a few years now and somebody I consider a friend. She's lived at the intersection of corporate leadership and deep human development. Nathalie Weister is an embodied leadership coach, and we're going to get into what that means in a minute, and the founder of Nathalie Danielle, where she helps high-achieving professionals stop running on autopilot and start leading from alignment, body, mind, and soul. But let's be clear, this isn't just theory. Nathalie's been in the trenches. She was director of people and culture at TelevisaUnivision, head of leadership and talent development at Hilton, and director of organizational development at Fox Networks Latin America. That's 3 global giants and 1 visionary operator. She's led teams across continents, scaled cultures during major transformations, and now she's channeling all that wisdom into helping leaders come back home to themselves, especially in high-pressure environments where burnout is the norm. Nathalie, how the heck are you doing?
Fantastic, Oz. What an intro. Thank you.
You like that? Yeah, we work hard on those intros. We want to make sure that we get every last detail out. If there's anything we missed, we will absolutely cover it in the podcast. So thanks so much for spending some time with us. All right, so I just talked about all those big companies that you worked for and all the big roles that you had. You split your career in corporate HR, but you actually, and we worked through this and talked through this when you first made this jump. You started your own coaching and consulting company, Embodied Leadership Coaching. So I want to understand what led to that decision. Like, that's a big moment. That's a big jump off for you. And then help us understand exactly what Embodied Leadership Coaching is.
Yeah, thank you. It was definitely the largest decision or the most impactful decision I've made in my career thus far. You know, I was following a traditional corporate path, climbing the ladder, so to speak. And, you know, there was something inside of me that felt off, that felt misaligned. And I use that word a lot. And it's a word that I think is becoming more common in our collective vocabulary. But for those who aren't accustomed to hearing that word, what that really means is that we're not connected. There's this sense of fragmentation. Like, I have to be one person at work and another person outside of work, at home, in my personal life with my friends or my family. And
Can I ask this real quick? Was there a moment where like something specific happened, something tangible happened, and you don't have to give like full details, but I'm just interested, like, did the light bulb go off because of like a certain interaction or something happening at work?
Yeah. To be honest with you, I went for a performance evaluation conversation with my boss at the time. And instead of the promotion that I expected, I was told that I was being layered. And I don't know if those were the exact words, but essentially the decision was to hire someone over me instead of me progressing into the next role. And it fell out of me, Oz. I mean, it was like my soul spoke. I turned off that conscious mind of what am I going to do, all the fears, and I simply said, I want out. And that was the beginning of a longer journey back home to myself, as I like to say. But, you know, I think it often we get these signs or these pushes that at the time can feel like rejection. And instead, it's just redirection. That is our own beginning of awareness to move closer to what we really desire for our lives.
Yeah, I love that. I find that when we think about the things that, like, you know, there's those 4 or 5 moments that change everything in your life. And a lot of times they're adverse, right? Sometimes it's you had a kid, sometimes it's you got married, sometimes it's, you know, got a new job, whatever it may be. But a lot of times it's, man, I got really stuck in a really bad spot, or I had a loss in my family that really impacted me, or something that I had been working very hard for all of a sudden wasn't attainable. And in fact, I was getting layered. Like, it's these adverse moments that we can either make or break us and take us in a different direction. And it sounds like you had a moment of awakening and you took that apparent misalignment from where you thought you were going to where now you really needed to go. And you went and started your own company. And I love that. And I love that you took that away. I'm interested just a little bit into the detail of that situation, right? Obviously, they didn't make the right decision and you were surprised by it, but did you understand the reasoning? Did it seem like it was more political than it was like actual, work output, or like what did you take away as you processed that moment after the fact? The decision didn't go your way.
I took away a few things. I mean, yes, I can point to political reasons or justification. I could choose to see the situation or see myself as a quote unquote victim of the circumstances, despite the fact that I'd been killing myself, working all hours for a couple of years, standing up this new business. Um, but instead, Oz, I really see it now as something that was necessary. And it really brought to light what my values are. And it's interesting you mentioned adversity. I mean, yes, I can say that the the layering was adverse, but that was also amid the backdrop of my own mother passing away and watching her decline through a really difficult cancer diagnosis. And really the lack of presence I had with her for those few precious months that we had when she really started to take a turn, because I was burying myself in work. And so this was just a wake-up call for me, and I think that I have to see that as the lesson, and walk away with a sense of gratitude for the circumstances outside of me, just mirroring back a knowing inside that this I couldn't continue down this path. I was making myself sick, and I was going down a path that wasn't healthy for me.
Prioritizing the wrong things and you weren't making time for the things that are really important. And sometimes we all need that wake up call. Wow, wow, wow. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that with us. That's an awesome story. And I'm so glad that it's led to this, slingshot for you that's taking you forward in this new career and this new path. You and I are both really passionate about finding purpose in our work and working in environments that give you that. I tell people on a daily basis, I try to create an environment that does that for our employees. I try to help people find work so they can have that purpose. And I know that, it's kind of few and far between. Not everybody wakes up vibrating and excited to go to work with that purpose. If I asked you to look back in your career at the places you have felt the most engaged with your work, let's talk like feelings. Like, what did that feel like? What did that seem like? Were you excited to get into the office? Were you excited to open up your laptop? Like, tell us how that felt to work in a place where you felt truly engaged.
When I think about moments where I felt truly engaged in my work, it was always when I was creating something from scratch, when I was in charge of leading a process, leading an initiative, and building. And I was fortunate enough to be involved and working in different environments that allowed me that, for better or for worse, we had to be scrappy. Budgets were tight and everyone was wearing multiple hats, especially on HR teams. So I loved any opportunity to really manage projects and also engage in these sort of global, multicultural environments. And so fortunately, I have that opportunity again in these companies where I could just get up and feel excited by what I was putting out there and seeing the impact from start to finish for employees.
Do you think that's individual to you? Like, are you a builder? Are you a creator? Do you think that's native to most professionals, or does everybody have kind of their own heartstrings that tug at them in different ways that drive that engagement, that drive that purpose?
I think everybody has their own sense of what motivates them. And there's all kinds of reasons why we're motivated. I don't think it's unique to me either. And it certainly was a foreshadowing to the path I've now taken, as an entrepreneur and this desire to really go out and be a creator of something from start to finish. That said, somebody who doesn't have that desire has a different drive. Maybe it's, leading people, being a fantastic individual contributor for a portion and being a deep specialist. All of that has value. I think for all of us, it's about tuning in and looking inward. And that back to that embodiment word, we are not raised and conditioned with emotional, I don't even want to use the word emotional intelligence. It's more about just an emotional awareness. What are we feeling at any given moment? And then how do we use that as a signal to either keep going in one direction or move in a different direction?
I had one bit of advice to give people. That is the most powerful thing for me. It's kind of ambiguous and vague, but it's know thyself. I spent my early 20s getting to know me, getting to know, right, what made me tick, what made me angry, what made me irritated, what made me happy, what I look for in a friend, what I look for out of work, what I look for out of a relationship. And I I was like a scientist out there. I was like testing lots of things. And then I would kind of have some self-reflection and think through, well, why did I react that way? Or why does that bother me? Right. And I'll be honest with you, this is an ongoing process. Like it's ongoing discovery. I had some things this weekend. I was talking about some family that opened up some things for me and unlocked some things for me that I didn't fully realize. But the good thing is that I spent a good chunk of my early college life doing that. And you know what that did for me, Natalie? It made me very intentional in pursuing the work I want, the relationships I want, the environments I want, right? And it doesn't mean that everything's worked out hunky-dory since that time, but when I love to create. And when you get you get an opportunity where there's a promotion and there's more money and more title and it's what everybody else is telling you is what, the next step should be. And yet maybe you don't have that opportunity to do what fulfills you, that puts you in your best self. You make decisions that might seem counterintuitive to most, but they're not the right fit for you. And so I love that you just stressed that, how important that is around for you and your purpose, and how I think the more people understand what gets them going, because, a lot of people talk about how much they don't like work or they just, work for the weekend or whatever it may be, but there's things you like, there's things that you enjoy. And the more you can maximize of that, the more you're going to feel good about the type of work that you're doing, how fulfilled you are. So I think that's great. So I do look at it as a lot of an individual responsibility, but I certainly believe that CEOs or HR leaders can do things to create that type of environment as well. So you worked in these very large organizations. If you're advising, say, a CHRO or a CEO who wants to start to build an environment where it's productive, it's engaged, where people feel good about their work, what would you advise them to do? What are some of the non-negotiables you think that makes sense for a large swath of an employee base rather than just maybe one or two individuals?
Right. And that's where it gets a little more challenging, just as a caveat, the larger the swath, so to speak, the harder it is to deploy any programming or any budget for that matter. That said, I think what it comes down to is empowering and facilitating the relationship that the people managers have with their people who report to them. That there is a culture and incentives to know, as you just so aptly said, know thyself, that we empower people managers with basic coaching skills about how to ask questions and deliver effective feedback and really get to the heart of what each unique individual reporting to them in an ideal structure that, there are 50 people reporting to one person, but that they know them and they really understand what makes those individuals tick so that they can offer the kind of feedback and the kind of praise or recognition that is meaningful for those individuals. And we really underestimate the power of just those simple relationships and the acknowledgement in the day-to-day versus the big promotions or, the nominations for the top talent group, whatever the company may offer.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because we talk a lot about like AI and what's it going to displace. And I've heard some things that managers could be displaced with AI, right? I've heard every job can be displaced with AI at some point or another. And I actually really push back on that because I actually think when we think about culture, when we think about the ability to get things done, right? I would tell a lot of people that everybody thinks they want to be a manager because they see it as the next step up. It's usually less money to do more work and like more emotional workload. So it's not for everybody. I really do believe that you have to have a service, mindset, and you have to be in service of others more so than yourself. And that's why organizations should create, paths for both, right? And not make it feel like you have to go one way or the other. But the key is like, if you hire the right managers and you train them in your culture, and it's a culture that you either fit in or fit out, and it's pretty understood pretty quickly when that is, and they enforce that and they grow people and they develop people, that's how you take a wide swath of an organization and focus on those positions and build those long-standing culture, but also those microcultures within those teams that align with your company's values. There's so much power in that, and it's really freaking hard. Because what happens? Most time people get promoted because, the Peter principle, they get, brought to their level of incompetence, or they're a really good individual contributor. So we make them a manager, or you hire somebody that was a great manager at another company, but that doesn't mean they're a great manager for your company. Or like, we just run at all different types of things when it comes to hiring and biases and speed and all things like that. And what happens is you make one of those decisions, which then leads to 5 more of those decisions. And then pretty soon you got something completely out of control. And so I've always recommended and advised, focus on those managers because those are the ones that are your, what do they say? They're the megaphone, right? They're the fire. They light the fire under the team, right? They shine the light on those different things. It's a really important role. And so I agree with you 100% that you got to make sure you have the right people in those places to be able to lead the charge, that if you want to have any chance of building an environment where people feel productive, they feel engaged, and where you have a great culture. So I totally agree. What about candidates on the market right now? So let's say that you want to work in that type of environment. They're few and far between. So some people might just say, I just need a job. I just want to work somewhere. But let's say that you have some choices, right? What would you advise candidates to look for in the interview process? What might they ask in the interview process to determine if it's that type of healthy environment?
Yeah, I would definitely advise candidates to do their due diligence as much as possible to get a real sense of what is this culture all about. That it has to extend beyond a couple of years. That has to be some, cross-functional conversations, certainly pointed questions about what the perspective is of those different individuals, as I said, in different functions, different levels. And ideally that they actually get to walk into the environment where they'll be working. I'm personally a fan of, let's go back to the age of apprenticeship and or some type of, dating before we get married in the context of work. And that's for the benefit of both the company and the employee. Is there a real fit here? And if there's not, it's not personal. It's not a dig on the individual. It's just simply back to that word. It's a misalignment and a signal that there is a better, more apt space for that person.
Love that. Spot on. And, as a leader, you have to not take it personally. And as an individual, you have to not take it personally. If anything, you should be on the constant quest to find your puzzle, where you fit in, where it works best for you, because then life just becomes a lot better. It's a lot better. You're a lot better at home if you enjoy your work, and vice versa. You're a lot, if you feel fulfilled, then you're going to do your best work, which probably means you make more money, which means you probably have more of the things that material things that you want in life. I mean, it's such a compounding thing. So I'm totally with you on that. And I think that's spot on. So book is Energy Blueprint for Leaders, correct? Okay, so you wrote this book. I'm very interested. I always love to know what stirred you to write a book, and then what can you tell us about the book if people want to pick it up?
Yeah. Well, I love this as sort of a bridge from our last topic. I used to think about, how do I become vital to a company so that I am so valued that they reward me, they promote me, their continual growth opportunities. And I've flipped that paradigm. Now as a coach, I have my own one-on-one coaching process that I call the Vital Leader Blueprint. right? And that is all about becoming vital inside. So it's leadership from the inside out. It's about how do I create the kind of environment inside of myself that is one of vitality, that is one of coherence, alignment, overall well being. And so this book is really the marriage of my corporate experience where I bring in actual case studies and personal experiences. And I connect that to this yogic principle of the chakras, which is a system that's been around over 3,000 years. And it's all about energy. And it focuses on these different energy centers, 7 energy centers that run through the human body as a system. But then I also apply that to teams and an organization as a system. So we can think about the energetic expression of these different centers, where they get misaligned or blocked or off kilter, and how we bring that back into balance with real tangible tools.
That sounds fantastic. Amazing. I'm going to have to pick that up. I need an autograph copy. I'll tell you a quick story. I went to Napa earlier this year, and I love meditation, and I'm trying to find different forms of it. And because of the fact that the first night I got there, I was on my East Coast time. Now I'm in the Pacific Coast time. So I'm 3 hours. So I wake up at 4:30. My wife's still asleep. I'm in this beautiful hotel out in Napa overlooking, like, obviously the beautiful wineries out there. And I'm like, I'm going to take this opportunity to go do this 50-minute meditation that I've been wanting to do, right? That's all about unblocking my 7 chakras, right? And I went out into this cold balcony, and it was like February, and I overlooked, and I did this meditation completely locked in for 50 minutes. And I come back in, and I was vibrating all day long. My energy felt so different and so positive than I ever had. I'd really never done a lot of work in terms of unblocking my chakras. And I truly believe in it. I truly believe in energy transfer and the different things that it can do for you. These are things that, 20 years ago, Oz would have laughed. But now I realize the power in these things and how we don't fully understand the metaphysical science about it. And so it doesn't make it any less real. And so I'm totally interested in looking at this, because that's been something that ever since that day I've been trying to chase that again and get that rush again. And it was a really, really amazing thing for me. So very cool. I'm very excited.
I just reiterate that came from inside of you. So it's always in you.
It's always in you. Yeah. It's the ability to block off the time and focus and do that. And like, we make time for what's important at the end of the day, but it's hard to take an hour, right? And just like, I got 4 kids, I got 2 companies, I got all these different things going on. But to your point, it's so powerful when you do it, and you got to make the time for it. So totally agree. Let's talk hiring. Let's talk work. Okay. So I'm interested. You've worked in these very large media companies, hospitality companies. You've seen these big HR organizations. You've hired a lot of people for your team and for these companies. So let's start here. Do you, all lessons learned over all this time, do you have a core hiring philosophy for people that you like to either bring in your team or what you advise your clients at your companies to do?
Hiring philosophy for me is just really tuning into finding the right candidate. There's not one overarching philosophy. I think it's got to be deploying sort of different mechanisms to ensuring that I'm getting to know the human being sitting in front of me, because we can all put on a great performance. We can all prepare to the max and show what we want to show. But again, back to the dating analogy, after a few months, that initial mask comes off and there's the real human being. So anything that will allow me to get to know that person, obviously in a compressed amount of time, through the right kind of questioning, through the right kind of interview process.
I love that. Yeah. Well, getting to know the real person, so you don't find out 3 months later that you got a lemon or you got the wrong fit. That's ideal.
That happens too.
It happens all the time. What questions do you do to try to get to know that person at a deeper level? What are some things that you've used in the past to kind of take that 2 to 3, 4 interview process and get a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I really like to focus on values, as I think values alignment is crucial. And typically an organization, a company has its values, and I want to see how the individual values are going to line up there, and there's some overlap or some synergy. And so I love to ask the question about when somebody felt like their values were potentially going to be compromised in a work setting, and what they did, what they chose. If a value of theirs was at risk, how did they handle that situation and why?
Love that. Let's talk about memorable interview experiences. I want to try to piggyback on that. If you don't have one, that's fine. But did you ever interview for a job where you
Oh,
found your values were like potentially compromised or misaligned, or it wasn't the right fit for you? Like, I'd like to know of an example of a time where you interviewed for a company. We don't got to name names, but you realized pretty quickly that this is not the place for me.
yes, 1000%. I will not name names to protect the innocent, but I did go through an interview process that lasted about 6 months. It was the never-ending series of calls. It was all virtual. This was also, one giveaway was it was around the time of the pandemic. Uh, that said, it was the never-ending interview process. There was no transparency, no clarity. I did not have one point of contact. It felt very uncomfortable, and at the time, I didn't listen to my own inner voice. I didn't see that as a signal for what the environment might be like inside. And so I went through the 6-month process. At the end, I was not selected. I'm going through a parallel process. I get to the end of that one, and then this original company comes back and they wanted to reengage. I reengaged and I ended up taking the job.
Oh,
And once I was inside, it was very clear this was not the right fit for me. The culture, that cultural alignment was not there. And I felt it immediately. But it was a huge lesson in reading the signs. These signs were pretty loud, and still I told myself the story that this company, this name, this brand was worth it. And it wasn't necessarily that a value of mine was severely compromised, but it was out of integrity for me not to communicate how I was feeling and request more transparency in the process and at least some sort of signpost as to where I'm going from here, because it was just I was allowing myself to be strung along, quite frankly.
trust you. A lot of times that comes from an experience, from some knowledge, from something you read, from an interaction you had, and you're usually right when those things come up. So you always, and that's again why I ask like the 5 whys. Why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling skeptical? Why am I feeling hesitant here? What am I seeing? And like you said, not all that glitters is gold. So even with those big brands or big comp packages or whatever it may be, there's only so much that makes it worth it to take on a job that's not a great culture, it's not great leadership, it's not a great place. So I appreciate you sharing that. What's something that frustrates you or you think is broken about the hiring process, either as a candidate or on the hiring side?
What we've been talking about, the theme here is that we aren't getting to know the human. And I also think the hiring process is often so reactive. We're rushing because all of a sudden a senior leader decided we need to hire this position, or all of a sudden somebody left, or whatever the circumstances are, we're operating in reactivity. And as a result, we're rushing through the process. The individuals engaged in the process are not present. They're not incentivized to think beyond just getting the person hired. And we often also hire for the future state or an aspirational state of the company, where we're going or where we think we're going instead of where we are today. And the reality is that environments change so quickly with leadership changes, technology evolving. We can't predict what kind of environment or what the needs are going to be in a year. So why are we hiring somebody for this aspirational state so that we feel better instead of looking at where we are today, getting people on board and really proactively considering the skills and competencies that are required now?
Yeah, everything you just said is 100% true and really actually energizes me because there's just so many things to fix in this space. And I spend my life and career trying to do because there's just a lot of issues and there's a lot of low hanging fruit that can easily be fixed. And very rarely do you find a full company or even an individual that's doing it, exactly the way it should be to get the best outcome. So I love you saying that. I totally agree. Is there when we've all had bad hires throughout our career too. When you miss on somebody, is there a theme there? Like, is it like maybe you didn't get deep enough, or maybe you didn't check that reference, or is there anything that you've seen kind of in the past that like, gosh, I wish I could have, or I learned this and or I'd redo this, anything like that come to mind?
Yeah, I think it's the general sense of just the reactive nature of the process, like I just described. When I missed on a hire, it was because I wasn't actually taking my time. I was rushing to get to the end, juggling 1,000 balls, as most of us are in leadership positions, and reacting, firefighting. And so I just wanted a warm body. The other issue too is that often a process is dependent on a budget being available. And the longer a process is open, the more scrutiny there is. And oftentimes the circumstances will change, back to my previous point, and all of a sudden the budget that existed for that role no longer exists. So again, it's misaligned incentives. I just need to get a warm body in the role. And so I overlook certain yellow or red flags that may have appeared in the interview process.
Bottom. Could not agree more. What, it's a part of every podcast mandatory contract to talk about AI at least once. So, let's ask about AI. Are you leveraging it all for your company? Are you leveraging it in your day to day? How has AI impacted you in either a positive or negative way?
Yeah, I use it every single day. I think, AI is here. Independent of your opinion, it's not going anywhere. And it is something that I leverage as a tool, as a thought partner for my business, support me and staying on, aligned in my messaging. It is a tool that I use to take a particular piece of content that I've created and repurpose it for other mediums. It's just a way to exponentially increase bringing value to the market. It's not a replacement for me. It's not a replacement for the kind of sacred one-on-one coaching containers that I curate, but it is absolutely foundational as a tool for helping me just with every operational piece of technology and back-end system. I see it as like a wrapper on a business. It helps with a lot of the front end and the back end. And then, we as humans need to sit there in the middle and really double down on the kind of human-centric value that we offer.
Well put. I agree. A wrapper. I like that analogy. I might use that. All right. So what's a good book or, obviously we talked about the energy blueprint for leaders. Obviously that's the top everybody needs to read. We recommend, but do you have a book that you read recently that maybe you shout out for our listeners to add to the list after that one?
Yeah. Actually, I'll offer two. I'm an avid reader. I am devouring multiple books at any given moment. Two actual business books that I've read that have been really great. One is called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Read it. Great book.
That's a great framework for anybody who is interested in telling a story and emotionally resonant messaging. We are story-driven beings, so I don't think it matters what job you're in. That's critical.
What's your hero's journey for your company?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And that's what connects you to your customers. That's what creates that emotional resonance, as I said. Second book is Oversubscribed by Daniel Weister. He is a very successful entrepreneur based in the UK, and it's great not just for entrepreneurs, but for any business owners who are kind of thinking about their business in this place of just overload, attention overload, attention economy, and how to become oversubscribed, meaning the demand exceeds your capacity to deliver. And you can be very choosy in the kind of work that you have, independent of what kind of job or industry you're in.
Never read that. I will check that out or subscribed. And Building a Story Brand, 2 great recommendations. Have a little fun with it. Is there any TV shows or movies you've seen recently that you recommend for anybody?
I've been so immersed in building a business, Oz. I can't speak to any real TV show that are calling to me right now. I'll think about that one.
Okay, I'm good. You need recommendations? I'll let you know. I usually 9 to 11 p.m. with my wife. We'll partake in a little TV. So if you need any recommendations, I'm here for you. All right, last question for me. If you could tell your 20-year-old self any bit of advice that you didn't know then, but that you know now, what would it be?
We've touched on this already, but follow your curiosity. Really follow what excites you. Tune in to your own energy, where you feel like you're leaning in versus moving back. Tune into that own inner voice. We all have an inner voice running, but really question, is that your voice or is that someone else's voice? I spent my first at least 15 years of my career following what I believed was the right path that was someone else's voice. And now it's so clear to me that although all of the steps along the journey were necessary to get me where I am, and I don't regret any of those choices, it's sort of the difference between, being on the train or being dragged by it. You choose your journey and listen inward and get quiet, just like you were describing in your meditative experience. It doesn't take an hour just to go inward and tune in and ask, what's here today? How am I feeling? And listen. And I wish I had started that much earlier in my career.
Feels like we only learn that with time and maturity, because when you're 20, 25, 30, you're just kind of running around and just doing everything that everybody tells you to do. And only after you have some adversity, you have some learnings, some lessons, do you start to build in the maturity to understand how important that is and how taking stock of where you're at emotionally, spiritually, mentally, what that does for the rest of your life if you actually do that. So could not agree more.
We're all in our own hero's journey, as you named it. Absolutely. That's part of being human. And we still have the capacity to choose every day. And I'd love to just inspire the younger audience members or listeners with that piece of advice to start listening to yourself sooner.
I love that. Well, we have a lot of executives that listen to this too. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the type of customer or the type of ideal, profile that would come to Nathalie Danielle and look for your coaching? What might they be feeling? Where might they be at?
I work with the individual on it's some level of awareness, whether it's get me out, this is not for me at one side of the spectrum, to that quiet whisper is starting, like something isn't feeling quite right. And I work with those individuals who know that the path that they're on is not the path they want to stay on forever, whether they're ready for that transition in this moment or not. And I take them through an arc, what I described earlier, my vital leader pathway. And it's essentially 7 stages, not the 7 chakras specifically, but I certainly bring in a lot of that holistic kind of different modalities ranging from energy to psychology. And we focus on not just the strategy for making a change, which is a critical last step, but fundamentally the story or the mindset that's driving certain patterns. And then the state of being, or what's happening in my physiology and my energy state, so that we can really address the root behind that dis-ease that they're feeling, so that we don't just jump to a new job thinking that that's the grand solution, because those same patterns are going to continue to play out. So anybody who is interested in a more holistic approach in some work across different modalities, like I said, ranging from modern psychology. I've trained in hypnotherapy. As I said, I work with some of these different yogic philosophies and energy. So it's a wild ride of transformation. And it's the greatest privilege of my life to support people in truly finding the professional path that is connected and aligned with their authentic self.
Love that. And the book is The Energy Blueprint for Leaders, and they can pick that up anywhere they get books. It's released. It's out there.
It is out. I published it July 7th. Can find it on Amazon.
There you go. Good rating after you give the Higher Learning podcast a high rating as well. Just go on a rating spree. And then lastly, if they want to find out about Nathalie Danielle, do you have a website, LinkedIn? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
I do. I'm on LinkedIn, Nathalie Weister or NathalieDanielle.co. And they can find me there with all of my different offers between the book, the one-on-one container. I also am launching a group container, group coaching experience as well. So there's lots of different ways that they can work with me. And I'd love to chat with anybody who's interested in what that is for them.
Love that. Well, Nathalie, I really appreciate you coming on. You've shared so much. It's been great. I know you're going to have a lot of listeners really happy with some of the practical advice you give. And hopefully we have some people reach out and pick up the book. Thanks so much for coming on. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you,
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.